Good morning, everyone. This is Dan O'Sullivan with your Bucks Island Area Fishing Report for Saturday, February the 7th. We're going to check in with our usual crowd. We got Tom, Lee, Gentry, and Tracy going to tell us what's going on these cold bodies of water. Help us put a few fish in the boat. We'll be right back with what the guys have to say. Hey, I'm up here at a very cold Guntersville at the Bassmaster Elite Series, and we're going to talk about Lake Guntersville with my good friend Tom Ott. Tom, man, it's the first day of the tournament. We're recording this thing, and it was 29 degrees, 10-mile-an-hour winds. Felt really cold this morning out there at takeoff, and they're still catching them. Crankbaits seem to be playing. What do you think's going on out here?
Well, it looked really cold, and I was glad I was here this morning instead of out there. That's for sure. Well, we talked about this last week, Dano. I mean, we knew that they were going to catch fish, and they're definitely doing that. And I certainly think it's just going to progress as the week goes on. I mean, it's just going to get better. We're going to get a little small warming trend, but it doesn't need to be much, but it's going to kind of kick things off a little bit better. But I mean, there's some guys that are kind of hovering around, but we talked about the weights maybe not being as big as we thought they might. And that's kind of playing out right now. I hope I might be, might be onto something there. But, there's just a couple of guys, if they catch a couple more fish, they could be up in that 25-pound range. So, it's just more of the same. It's Guntersville. And, I think those fish are down there with their little hats and their lawn chairs, and they're just kicked back because the cold doesn't seem to be bothering them. It's unbelievable what these guys are doing. And they're catching them in those same places that you catch them in the spring, you catch them in the fall. They might be slightly deeper. Some of the things that I've noticed are, the ditches, little drains and ditches. Those guys are really working those over and, just making multiple casts in an area. So, it's anybody's game right now. It's just the first day. I mean, I think my money's still on Fisher. I mean, just because I like the kid, and I think he's really, incredible. Trey McKinney, he's got a great shot too. It's just going to be cool to see how it plays out. No forward facing sonar. These guys are doing it old school. And that's, I think, what everybody wanted to see,
I talked to Craig Wiggins, a customer of ours at Bucks Island, a Bass Cat customer, and he loves Guntersville. He was out last weekend, and he was talking about how green the grass is for this time of the year, and you could see that on the ramp today with some grass that washed up on the ramp. So it seems like grass is playing a role, drains are playing a role, and I know the crappie are probably still kind of out there too on those edges. You might even be able to catch some of them on the grass too. Well, Tom, brother, as always, we appreciate everything, and we will talk to you again next week and have something to discuss about this tournament. Hey, we're right up here at Guntersville. We're watching the Elite Series. They're going down there to where Gentry Gordy talks about every week down at Lake Martin next week. Gentry, it's cold up here. They're still catching them. I'm hearing that they're still catching them at Lake Martin a little bit too, that things are looking pretty good, and that largemouth are starting to play. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, for sure. It's, we talk about it. The cold don't hurt those fish at Martin. I mean, the largemouth is a little bit more than the spotted bass, but I think, it's going to be a little bit warmer down here throughout the week. And if it continues to stay in that mid 50s, you may even see a touch of 60s, air temperature wise. Man, you ain't gonna have to have your glasses on or not, but it's gonna warm that water up enough to where, you're gonna really have to watch those guys throwing a square bill up in the mud, because that's where your largemouth are gonna be, and that's one or two good largemouth a day is gonna be a huge difference in that tournament.
Yep. Yeah, I'm hearing that that we're starting to see more largemouth coming out of there. I even talked to Matt Herron, who went down there, played a little bit just to go play, just down fishing, working on things. And he had a good time and caught some spots, but also caught some largemouth.
Yeah. And, me personally, I think this water this year has got a little bit colder than it did the last 2 years. And, that may shake things up a little bit. So as it starts to warm just a couple of degrees, I think that's why you're going to see your largemouth really start to take off in that shallow, muddy water. Well, I say muddy
Gotcha.
water, the stain, but your clay, your clay banks, the stuff that gets kind of churned up there. Red
Yep.
square bill, red rattle trap will really play, I think.
Gotcha. All right, let's go to Jordan Lake. What are we thinking out of there?
A lot of the same, Dano. We don't, of course, over in the new lake and Blackwell and stuff, you've got some flats, some shallow area to throw a rattle trap and square bill. But I don't, you're not going to catch a boatload of fish over there. Now, the new lake will, but not so much throwing a rattle trap up shallow. Some of those ditches up there in the new lake where like that old dam got pushed over the rock humps and stuff. Those play really well this time of year, but they're always big spotted bass in there. But still flipping the dead grass and trash piles, chatterbaits. I mean, anything like that. If of course, if you don't go up the river, if that's not your style, I know we talk about that a lot because there's fish up there, man. They're up there, 365 days a year. Sometimes they bite better than others. But a jig in those eddies and blowdowns, and even washing a big spinnerbait down some of those current banks over those treetops, always play, especially in the cold if there's some bait around them. But down the lake, man, it's pretty much just wintertime fishing. There's a lot of shallow points down there. They taper off really fast. So it's just a matter of hitting those fish, up shallow on those points when they pull up there.
All right, brother. We appreciate everything as always. Good information. And we'll talk to you again next week and maybe even see you next weekend. Hey, we're up here freezing at Lake Guntersville in the morning, getting ready for Elite Series. They're going out today at Lake Guntersville. But we got Lee Pitts is going to talk a little bit of Weiss Lake and Neely Henry. It's cold all over North Alabama. What are the fish doing? Let's start at Weiss Lake.
You nailed it. It's cold, and as long as the wind is not really just blasting on you, it is still fishable. Some of the water is cleaning up. It's the temperature drop that's kind of hurt us right now. Fishing's a
Mhm.
little tough. Um, that's not saying you can't catch them. I mean, they're still out there. They're still going to eat. Slowing down is the key. A jerk bait, small crankbait, something that you can just kind of stop and it suspends. These fish are not real aggressive. It's a deal that typical springtime. We had some warm weather, water temperatures coming up, fish are starting to move. Got knocked back a little bit this last week. It's just a slow down type deal with our bass fishing and even with our crappie fishing too. Crappie are biting a little bit better. Finding the protective little bays and some of that transition type stuff where they're coming out of the river, trying to get in the mouths of some of these creeks and getting on some of the brush piles a little bit deeper. Slowing down is the key. No matter if you're bass, crappie, catfish, whatever you're wanting to fish for right now, slowing down, really working the area, being real thorough. They're not going to chase a bait. So
Mhm.
look at your jerk baits, look at your suspending baits, things like that you can stop. Let them just come up behind it and kiss it. And even with our crappie, slowing it down a little bit, throwing a jig on a float. That's something good that you can hold it right there in that strike zone and quiver it and just make them come and kiss it.
All right, Neely Henry, we got about a minute left. Let's get some good information. Is the current helping at all with those fish? Because I've had times in the past where it was February cold and I found them on bars because of current. Is that the deal?
It is, but too much current is going to kill that bite. You
Okay.
got to have a little bit of water moving. They're not going to sit out there and fight that current. They're going to get in a comfort zone where either around rock, hard clay bottom, you don't necessarily have to have a lot of structure on it. They like to get on these hard clay bottoms when it's cold like this and you've got sunshine. That's some things I look for. Look for the longer taping points that these fish can kind of back off and just sit there and just wait for the bait to come and flush by them. That's some of the things that you're looking for right now. Once again, slow down. Everything's cold. Everything's moving slow. You can even watch your minnows in your minnow bucket. They're not running circles and running laps. They're just kind of sitting there holding, just waiting on better days. So slow down, really pick an area apart, and you can still catch some fish.
Brother, we appreciate everything. Thanks for the time, and we'll talk to you again next week. Hey, folks, we're up here at Lake Guntersville at the Bassmaster Elite Series trying to stay warm, and Tracy Robinson's doing the same, keeping up with Logan Martin and Lay Lake. Tracy, let's go ahead and kick some knowledge today. What's going on at Logan Martin?
Yeah, Logan Martin. Hardly no boats out there today. I guess everybody's up there at Guntersville watching the pros this week. That's a good thing.
Yep.
Logan kind of stabilized this week a little bit there after the cold fronts. There we had a couple of warm afternoons, sun shining. Those fish slowly creeping back up into those shallower red clay banks there. That's still kind of the key there, looking for that red clay bank and the rocks, the little chunk rocks and the little boulders there. Square bills, flat sided crankbaits. That's kind of been the key. I don't know. There's been a big difference between your chartreuses, your reds, or your whites or grays, but the key has just been getting in those places where the sun's beaming down on that red clay bank and bouncing a square bill crankbait off of those rocks. So that's kind of been the key pattern for the bass this week. The crappie seem to still be kind of in the ditches and the creeks out there. They hadn't really made any kind of move in the past week. 12 15 foot's probably been the key on the channels, the creek channels. I don't know that it really mattered either whether it's mid lake, up lake. Two different creeks that I know of, one mid lake and one up the lake. They're crappie are pretty stacked up in those ditches. So 12 to 15 foot on the crappie with the jigs. Lay's a little bit different. Lay's fishing a little different than Logan. A little bit of mix of still the grass. I told you we caught a few last week on the grass. You can get a few bites in the grass and where it's clumped up a little bit. I guess that sun heats it up more so in those clumps. But some good quality bites in the grass, pitching around, flipping around your plastics, but not a lot of numbers. But when you get bit doing that, they're pretty good quality. The easier bite on those windier afternoons, the jerk bait on the points on the main lake has been the easier bite. Still a few scoping fish scattered around chasing some bait in Paint Creek and in the middle creeks too. But
Yep.
the crappie have been primarily still in the timber. You have to look at a little bit more timber than normal, but if you'll keep scoping around or side scanning, you'll see some of the crappie in the timber. Once you find them, vertical jigging on top of them or vertical minnow on top of those is probably the easier way to catch those.
I know those crappie will suspend in that wood and so will the bass, and forward facing sonars are a great way to do that. Is a float and fly or something like that, if you're not using forward facing sonar, a good deal?
I would say it probably is, Dan. Though I hadn't played around with it much, and I do talk about the crappie in the timber more so than anywhere else. But that's probably because that's where I'm staying at when I'm bass fishing and looking at them. So there may be other options there, but that's kind of the crappie that I see is near the bass.
Brother, we appreciate everything as always, and we will talk to you again next week, my friend. Well, that'll wrap up our Bucks Island area fishing report for Saturday, February the 7th. Hey, folks, if you're just looking for that special Valentine's Day gift, you got one more week to be able to buy that special boat or tackle or apparel or whatever it is. But we're here at Bucks Island to help you. If you want to come in and, he might be wanting that special bass boat that he's been looking at or that nice pontoon that she's been looking at, come see Katie, Patrick, and Melissa. They'll figure it out and put a really nice Valentine's Day present in your guys' lives. Come see us at Bucks Island. You are the most important part of us, and we appreciate you very much. We tease and we kid, but we love having you around. Thank you very much.